Hey, y'all, welcome back to the podcast. We're going to do a little quick and dirty one today because I have a dance show to get to. And this week was stacked. There was a lot going on, a lot of creation, a lot of facilitation and teaching, and it was a beautifully full and rich week. And it also meant that I did not have time to record a podcast in advance. So here we are doing it on the fly. We're getting it done. We're coming in hot today. And I want to talk about the magic that can happen when you do things that are out of character for you. And today, it's not totally out of character. Let's be so for real. Me being in a dance company that is all about women's empowerment and women reclaiming their vital, sexual, sexy energy, like that's not really out of the norm for me. However, doing a performance in front of an audience of 300 people, that's not in my everyday norm. Getting up in like sassy lingerie, shaking my ass in a room performing for 300 people, that is definitely not my norm, at least anymore. Like I used to be big into performance. That was my life for a very long time. And then life happens and we go in different directions and different things excite us. And that is a big part of being able to act out of your quote unquote character, is being able to pivot. And that is something that I am very, very, very good at. I am someone who won't stay in things that no longer feel alive. And it doesn't mean that I'm a passive person and I'm letting life and relationships happen to me. And if they don't meet my high standards, then I'm just going to leave. That's not it at all. Like I am someone who goes all in. I commit. I bring the best of myself to any situation, any relationship, any project. And if that doesn't activate the other person or the other people in the dynamic to also operate in their most expansive self, then it creates this friction in the dynamic, and it kind of feels like you're slogging along and dragging someone or something, and it's got this density to it. And when that happens, I will pivot. So my first pivot is always to do something that's kind of out of the ordinary, that kind of shakes up the energy, and see what happens. So whether that is, just saying something that's out of character to kind of stoke the fires or kind of jolt people back into their body. Humor is really great for this, but also just saying something that feels really true, that it might take the other person by surprise. And that can be also like the activator to reboot the connection. And if that does not work, then I'm going to do a bigger character shift move and pivot entirely. And I will pivot myself out of that dynamic. Because listen, we don't have time, and I certainly don't have the energy or patience to stay in relationships, to stay in projects, to stay in dynamics where it's not clicking, where it's not flowing, where my presence isn't valued and wanted. Like, if that's the case, I'm doing everyone a favor by removing myself. And I think if we are able to kind of play with this a little bit more, we would see a lot of a lot of change. People would leave things that they had long outgrown. And I think one of the reasons why people don't do that is because they are afraid of hurting someone, which is, I get it. No one wants to be an asshole. No one wants to be the bad guy, but sometimes you will be. Sometimes you have to be the bad guy in order to be the hero in your own story. And when we have this good person programming running, it won't let us do that. It'll be like, no, you must be good and you must, maintain your image at all costs. And even if the cost is the loss of who you are, like you lose yourself by staying, it's not exactly a vibe. Not exactly in service to love or in service to creation or in service of who you came here to be. Like you are magnificent. I mean, you wouldn't be in this conversation or playing with this line of work or creating art or being of service somehow if you didn't have that magnificence running through your veins. And so sometimes the character that we adopt to survive, so we all have survival strategies, adaptations, personas that we develop in response to our upbringing, in response to unrelational dynamics, in response to chaos, in response to pain. And those are fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, they can only take you so far. They take you out of the chaos of the survival mode. They get you through that. And this is why I never shit on those parts, because they're so valuable. Because without them, you likely wouldn't have survived something that was really difficult for you. So we want to have reverence for those parts, okay? But those parts, because they are activated and generated in a survival matrix, they do not take you where you want to go. There's a great book, I'm probably butchering the title, but like, What Got You Here Won't Take You There. It's something along those lines. It's a great book. I loved it. And he talks about this framework and, the things that get us to this point here are not the things that are going to take us where we want to go. And so whenever we want to do this quantum leap, or we want to embark on a new chapter, or we want to up-level our relationships, what got us to this point is not going to take us to that destination. We have to transform. We have to upgrade. We have to look at that software and update it, because you're essentially running an out-of-date operating system. And then wondering why we can't get the upgraded result. It's like your phone. If you don't run the update, some of your apps are not going to work because your operating system is not compatible with the app you want to use, or whatever you're doing on your phone. And the same is true with our human system. There are certain patterns that are compatible with an old algorithm, with an old operating system. And those will work if you remain in that ecosystem. But all of your dreams do not live in that ecosystem, or they would already be there. Your dream relationship, your dream life, the things that you want to create don't live in that vortex, because they are an expansion of energy, and they call an expansion of energy from you, through you. And that can be really confronting, because we essentially have to learn new ways of being, new ways of doing things. And that can be very humbling to our ego to be a beginner again. You'll see me do this quite often. Part of it is this exercise in making sure my ego doesn't get too out of hand, is being a beginner again. Because when you have a certain level of success, a certain level of mastery, it can be easy to get caught in the egoic framing of that, of like, ooh, look how good I am. It's so much better than everybody else. This superiority can come through. And I like to really keep a pulse on that, because I do have a tendency to run that pattern already. So, and it's a complete defense mechanism, by the way. It's not because I actually feel superior. That superiority only comes up, ironically, when I feel inferior. You know, the people who are most grandiose are the people who are the most insecure. You know, we have these paradoxes that filter through the human experience, and they can fuck us up a little bit. But the truth is, anytime someone is in a superiority or grandiose pattern, it's because there's a bigger part of them that feels inferior, that feels small, that feels insignificant or stupid. And they don't want you to find that out about them. So they put on the performance. They put on the mask. They put on this like artificial way of being. And in hopes that no one will kind of see beyond the curtain or like see through the fog. But when people who have gone through like deep, deep initiations, and they've walked through the fires of their transformation, they sniff it out a mile away. Like anytime someone is operating that pattern, I'm like, oh yeah, clocking that. Be like, thank you for telling me exactly how you actually feel about yourself. And this is one of the magical things about being a magical person, is that just because someone is presenting something doesn't mean that they aren't also presenting the energetic behind it, because they are always. So if there is a lack of congruence there, someone who has walked through an initiation portal, they're deeper in their embodiment, is going to feel that incongruence. They're going to sniff it out. They're going to know something is off. And if we do these practices that kind of humble us a bit sometimes, shadow work is very humbling. That's why I love it so much. Because it takes something to admit the darker things about yourself, the things that you don't want people to know, but you tell yourself all the time. You know, to be able to find the power inside of yourself to look at that cleanly without, you know, throwing yourself under the bus, and then to actually admit it out loud and be witnessed in that. Very, very powerful alchemy. Unfortunately, the masses are not really interested in that. But who cares? If you're interested in it, if you're interested in becoming the most expansive, alive, integral, congruent version of yourself you can be, if you're committed to something bigger than yourself and creating something bigger through you and your magic and your medicine, who the fuck cares what the masses are doing? I certainly don't. Because if I get hooked into that, it takes me out of having to focus on what I need to look at in myself. And so I do play these little experiments with myself where I will start as a beginner and see what my ego does with it. At this point, it's pretty chill. Like when I started my poetry page at nothing, and then I have an Instagram that's close to 1,000 people who are there primarily because of my writing. That is how I gained that following, was through consistent writing from 2013, I think I got on Instagram. 2013 to 2026. Consistently showing up on a platform, writing, being of service, being a contribution. And that's how I built that following. But it's really easy to kind of hide in that identity of someone who has a really big following. You can think that you're more significant than you are. And I'm not bashing myself. I'm not saying that my work isn't powerful and potent. It is. My writing is exceptional. I love it. It is definitely a gift for me. But there is this spot where we can hold the truth of it, but then our ego wants to kind of crank that up a bit and be like, yeah, but look how good I am. I'm so much better than everybody else. So I make sure that there's checks and balances in my system so that that part that's like, ooh, look how good I am. I'm so much better than everybody else. And your part like that might have a different thing that it says, but we all have that part. Your part might be like, you're such a piece of shit. Like, no one cares about you. Like, it can lie in that direction too. But a lot of the time, like, we do have like these protective force fields that our egos like to construct so that we don't have to do the deeper digging. We're like, oh, I'm done. I'm through. I've done all the transformation that I need to do. I'm healed. I'm fixed. I'm perfect. And then you get bitch slapped from the universe again and again and again and again. And so, having been through many of those bitch slapping moments, and, you know, eventually it did break down those very, very thick walls that I had of, I want to be untouchable. I want to be so much better than everybody else that no one can even get close enough to know that inside I don't feel that way about myself at all. Spicy. And so, having been initiated through those portals for a very long time, it did bring me to this awareness of it is so valuable to take myself back to the beginning regularly. So when I started my poetry page, it was at 0, both on Instagram and on Threads. Nothing. And I'm like, well, this will be an interesting experiment because my one account is really big based on my writing, and this is a different form of writing. And my ego's like, yeah, it's just going to pop off and it's going to go viral and all the things. And then my human is like, well, we'll see. That might not be. It might be, but it might not be. So let's just show up and see what happens. And the Instagram, it doesn't grow very much. Part of that is how much I post because there's like extra steps when it goes on Instagram versus Threads. Threads, I can just open the app and I can write the poem directly in the app, and I don't have to do extra steps of creating a image with the poem and then downloading that and then uploading it into Instagram. Like, those are a lot of extra steps that sometimes I just don't have the time or energy to do. So it's not a surprise that that account doesn't grow as quickly. But even the Threads account, like, it's taken like a year and a half, I think, to crack 1,000 followers. But what I love about it is that those 1,000 people, and I keep my Threads account and my Instagram account with my poetry anonymous. Like, obviously, my close people know that it's me, but it doesn't have my name on it, and it doesn't have a photo in the profile that you can tell that it's me. I do share some of my photos in the grid in the feed, so I mean, you can figure it out. But on Threads, I don't do that. So it is literally just my words and the way that I'm writing and the poetry that I'm writing. And the people who are there because they resonate with what I'm writing, which is really fucking cool because it's a different style of writing for me. I've written as an educator, as a teacher for so long, and writing as a creative and a poet, very different. I also am a songwriter, but again, that's a very different mode of writing. And so to begin again and start at zero, there's a lot of moments where I'm like, fuck, I just wish that I could like transfer the following and the engagement over to this account because of what I think it would mean about me. And we're going to do a deeper episode on meaning making later, like maybe next week or the week after, because it's such a big thing that fucks people up, but you can use it to your advantage. And I want to teach you how to use it for your advantage. But when I make it mean something about myself as an artist and that meaning is disempowering, it kills off the creative energy, the vitality, the expansion. And those are important patterns to track. It's important to see yourself in action. It's important to be able to feel what happens in your system when you get out of sync with yourself, when you get out of alignment, when you are not congruent. And that data, that information is very, very valuable because the more aware you are of it, the quicker you can catch it and get back into alignment. That's the game. And when I do these little ego eradicator experiments, and I'm not trying to like get rid of my ego. You can't, by the way. But what I want to do when I say eradicate the ego exercise is dial it down so it is not running amok, so that that part is not calling the shots in my life. That's what I mean. And when I can bring it back down into a healthy range, because having healthy ego is so important. It gives you your sense of self. People in the spiritual community who are like, get rid of the ego entirely. It's bad. It's evil. Like, they don't fucking know what they're talking about. Okay? You need your ego. You just don't want it dialed up into this range where it has you take on more masks and more personas and essentially more armor that you will have to deconstruct. We want your ego to be there to give you a sense of identity, a sense of self, to be able to, bring the hammer down, set your boundaries when you need to, set your standards. It's very helpful with that. So we've got to train it to be in a range where it's got a healthy expression. And so these experiments really have helped me do that, where I put myself in a position of being a beginner. And there's so many ways you can do that. And this was hard for me for the longest time because I had this whole identity around, looking good and avoiding looking bad. And so I would only do things that I was really, really good at. to uphold that image because I thought it gave me significance and protection against pain. And when I realized that that wasn't actually the case, and that I was still going to experience pain and disappointment and humiliation, all the things, I started to work with it a bit different. So I began by just trying new things, being a beginner, like going in knowing I'm going to suck, and feeling all of the emotions and the somatic sensations that go along with, sucking, not being good at something, the embarrassment, the humiliation. So the things that my protective mechanisms, like the strategies that they developed in response to the pain and the humiliation and the embarrassment that I experienced early on in my upbringing, become the thing that, kind of act as a bit of a buffer for a period of time, and then they stop being effective. I was mentioning this at the beginning, and I probably went on a tangent and didn't close the loop. But the things that got you here won't take you there. And so these strategies, while they are effective at getting through something that has you be more in a survival pattern, they will start working against you if you step into the path of wanting to thrive in your life, which following the path of your dreams, following the path of your heart, calling in and creating really aligned love and relationships, that requires an upgrade. That requires us to leave those adaptive strategies behind and then develop new ways of being and operating in the world. And so in order to develop those new ways of being and new, avenues of going through the world, you actually have to face the thing that your protective mechanism came in to cover up and stop you from feeling. So for me, being a beginner, it brought up these feelings of humiliation and embarrassment. Those two things are so spicy for me. They fuck me up real big. And especially back then when I started doing these experiments, I would just get whacked over and over and over again. But I was like, you know what? I can do this. I can feel it. It's okay. I'm not a loser. I just don't know what I'm doing yet. So along with being the pivot queen, I'm also really, really good at the art of reframing and being able to frame things in a way that stokes possibility, still connects you to reality, but allows you to lean in the direction of possibility instead of, shitting on yourself 24/7. Because again, that is an adaptive strategy that will only take you so far. It will not get you where you want to go. You can't be an asshole to yourself and then be an extraordinary lover to someone else and love them well and build them up and cheer them on, because that energy of how you relate to yourself eventually bleeds in to your sight, to your energy, and how you relate to the other person and how you see them. So as you clean that up in yourself, you naturally become more effective as a relator in all of your relationships, but especially the romantic variety. And this is why I find this work to be so interesting and so valuable, because when you start to dismantle all of these blocks and masks and infrastructure that's protecting your wounds, and you start to air those wounds out, then they start to heal. Like the only way for me to really move through those humiliation wounds was by feeling the humiliation, but in an upgraded context. Like, I wasn't actually being made fun of. I was just having to feel that sensation of humiliation because, I didn't know how to make a particular cocktail when I was learning how to bartend, you know, or when I started learning guitar and my fingers couldn't, they weren't strong enough to make the chord. And so you strum the guitar and it sounds like shit. Those were moments where I would get so flushed and so embarrassed. And I was smart enough at that point to surround myself with people who were very patient and encouraging, and just they did not humiliate me when I was already up against that internal humiliation. They gave me a frame of how I could be compassionate to myself, how I could be kind to myself, how I could get back on the horse, so to speak, and try again. And I just continued to replicate that pattern again and again and again until I got to a point where I would legitimately want to run these experiments where, okay, I'm going to legitimately put myself in the position where I know that I'm going to suck. I know that I am going to be meeting those edges and those stories, and I'm going to do so in a way where, especially now being in my 40s, the stakes are a bit higher. Learning guitar, the stakes aren't very high. I'm sorry, they're just not, because I could just play guitar in my bedroom and that's it. But when the stakes are higher, I'm writing poetry, which is an extension of my soul and my internal landscape and my deeply, deeply intense emotional world. And then I put that out in the world for other eyes to see. I'm immediately setting myself up for criticism. And there's always people who are like, this is so fucking dumb. Or they get really mad at the poem, or they get really triggered by it. And had I not done all of this work up until this point, I probably would have gotten hooked by that. But now when it happens, I'm like, oh, they just got whacked. I transmitted something really true, and it hit something in them that is trying to open, that is trying to transform. And this, poem became the activation for it. At least one of the activations. It might not be the activation that cracks them open, but it will be one in a series of activations that eventually will crack them open, or they'll just keep torturing themselves by adding more masks and more armor. And some people, that's the path that they're going to walk this time. They aren't here to deconstruct it. They aren't here to transform themselves. They aren't here to liberate themselves from their wounds. They are here to put on more armor, become more fake, keep hiding, wearing every single egoic persona they can find, so that no one will ever know the truth of who they are. That is what they're here to experience this time around. And then there are people who are going to de-armor. They're going to take that armor off. They're going to get in intimate relationship with their interior. They're going to learn how to be extraordinary lovers and relators. They're going to bring beauty through into the world. They're going to create art. They're going to create magic. They're going to create structures and infrastructure that transforms how we relate as a society. There are those people too. And that is who my work is for. And that is also where I devote my time and my energy and attention. So if I come across someone who is really committed to their identity, they're really committed to upholding all of that armor, I let them have it. I don't need to change that. It's not my job to change that. And I let them have it. So if they want to project onto me, okay. It doesn't mean that I'm internalizing that. It doesn't mean that I'm letting it permeate my energetic and emotional boundaries. because I don't. Like I've done enough work to be able to pull that apart and be like, oh, I see what that is. And the more that we work on this path of relational mastery, the easier that does become. And when I put myself out there in a vulnerable position, I don't do it until I know that my system is stable enough to hold that type of projection. If someone came at me and said the thing that would hurt me the most, could I hold it? And I don't mean hold it and like digest it and make myself wrong, but like, can I just be with that and then respond effectively? So sometimes what I'll do, depending on the texture of the energy, is I will just reflect it right back. Like, I'm not holding that. I'm not taking it on. I'm not considering it. Like, if you come in with malicious intent, I will reflect that energy right back, and it is fast and it is sharp and it whacks people. And those are the ones who are like, oh, you're such a bad, bad woman. You're evil. When all I did was just send their energy right back to them. The irony. But I'm okay being the villain in those people's stories. I really am. And it also, like, once I send the energy back, it does not affect me. And then there are people who I can tell there's a bit of an opening and they just got a little fucked up. And then I'll dialogue with them. I'll give them an invitation to meet me on an upgraded level of dialogue. If they take it, we dialogue. And if they devolve in their communication, that's when I will send the shot, the reflection, the energy right back. And so there's a lot of ways that I act and I show up to protect, the vulnerability from not being exploited, but also protect it in a way where I don't have to armor anymore. And when we run these experiments of, well, let's see what being a beginner is all about and what comes up for you. If you don't know what your core wounds are, being a beginner will illuminate that. Because whatever comes up is the thing that you're trying to hide, the thing that you don't want people to know about you. And that's the thing that you create a lot of armor and you create a lot of adaptive strategies around. It's the thing that causes the most interference in your relationships too. Because if it's something that you can't be with, you have to hide it. You have to keep it hidden so that the other person doesn't see it. And then your relationship becomes about keeping these parts hidden instead of opening, like locking into that super highway of energy that happens when two open hearts come together. And then you create a vortex of this like juicy, creative, vital, sexual energy. Even if you're not fucking, that pulse is still there. And it's that vortex that you can now use to create what you're both respectively here to create. It's a much funner type of relationship to have. It's a higher level of relating, though, that requires you to be responsible for yourself, your parts, your adaptive strategies, your armor, and being someone who's willing to deconstruct that so that you can live more openly, more free, more liberated, more creatively expressed, more juiced up, more alive, more vital. It's the vibe. So I want you to let that digest. Maybe consider running your own little experiments of what you might do to really step into doing something out of character, doing something that is a little different than what you would normally do. Like really coming back to the beginning here. Like, can you do the thing that is out of character, but if you were to do it, it opens a whole door of possibility? Can you go, join a dance troupe that you're like, well, shit, I'm going to be dancing in front of 300 people in a thong later. Okay. Or maybe it's, starting to write poetry and publishing it on the internet. Maybe it's, going back to school and learning the thing that you always wanted to learn about. Like there's no shortage of things that can send you on that quest of acting out of your like tight prescribed character, and like do the thing, say the thing that's a little unhinged. Say the thing that you're thinking, but you hold yourself back from saying. That is a shift. That is acting out of character, and that also has you be in the practice of congruence as well. No one who is in their true power is someone who is saying one thing, thinking another, and doing another. Those people are wildly incongruent. They leak their energy and their power everywhere. That's why they can't ever like really like hone the energy, because they're leaking it all the time. And if you clean that one thing up, and that is the first focus in the last year experiment. So if you want to come join us, the price goes up every month. So this is going to be the cheapest that you can get in at. And because I have my dance show, I'm not changing the price until tomorrow. So you can get in for $88. And on Saturday, it will go up to $188. And we are working on that thread of congruence and coherence in month one, so that we really get that dialed between what we're thinking, what we're saying, and how we're acting, because that is how you activate the channel of your power. And we want to start there, to start a year of, plot twists and, living like it's our last year. So we're making big, bold moves all year round. And that becomes a lot easier to maintain long term when your power isn't leaking. And so if you clean that one thing up, and then you start working on this spot of, okay, I'm gonna act out of character. I'm gonna do the things that I feel like deep in my heart I really want to do and pursue, but I'm also fucking terrified because I know it's gonna reveal these tender spots, these wounds that I have a lot of structure and adaptive strategies and protective mechanisms around. And you start playing in that arena, and you start facing those parts of yourself. Again, if you want support in that journey, I want you to apply to Initiated, because that is a big part of the work that we do there. And you have a lot of good holding, and there's a whole body of work and teachings that go along with that, and integration exercises and practices to support you, so you're not kind of freeballing it. But hey, if you are a freeballer, then go for it. But if you would like a little bit more support and going through that path in a more efficient way, in a more effective way, then apply for Initiated, because that is going to be the track that will help you there. And, for the weekend ahead, just make a practice of doing things that are a little out of character for you in the best way. Just try it on, play with it, have fun. When you feel something, say something. When you see something beautiful in someone, say it. It's probably really out of character to do so. Or maybe you're a chatterbox and the thing out of character would be to not say anything. I don't know. But for most people, the expression of vulnerable truth is pretty foreign, and they keep things in. And when they're impressed by someone, or they're proud of someone, or they're inspired, they keep it to themselves. No one will ever know how you feel about them if you never tell them. Even if it's a stranger, even if, you're inspired by a conversation you had with a barista, say something. Act out of character. Do the thing that enhances the experience of someone else being alive, and watch how fast your life starts to move in new, expansive, and fun terrain. Okay? I love you all, and I will be back next week. And I hope you have a beautiful weekend, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye, friends.